And we're live. And this week we have got somebody from Greenland, obviously by looking at his background, or maybe from India. It's my great, my great social media conference buddy in San Diego, Natchi. So you run social media for churches in India. I think that's the basic, like short elevator pitch. Can you tell us how you got into that and how your business has evolved over the years?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me, Tim. Crystal, it's been awesome. So very excited to be here. So start off with general overall traditional marketing world. Yeah. So this was about 20 years ago, got into marketing space, and close to 15 years ago, we were initially, my wife and I, those days we were business partners. So we started an agency. We both were B school buddies, and we started our own business after spending some time in the corporate world. And we were running a traditional ad agency. So we were doing print stuff. We worked with clients like World Bank and so on. So we're doing print and some TV media and a few other things, events and everything. So it was a traditional ad agency. And then one day we had our own church having a requirement for the digital space. This is like 15 years ago. So they were going on TV and they did not have a web page, and it all started with just a web page. So we were chatting and we heard that our church needed a web page. And overnight, like literally, this was like at 8 o'clock in the evening after the evening church service. And then we asked, are we going like global television program tomorrow? And our church guys were like, yeah. And then I'm like, do we have a website? Because like my marketing brain is saying we need a website if you're going global, right? So, and our church said, I don't think we have a webpage. So we said, let's put one, So we created one through the night, like at 2 a.m. We got the site up and running for the next day's program. Literally, that's how I started and stumbled upon it. And then it was more of nonprofits, because both me and Tina, my wife, we have a heart for nonprofits, and we believe that nonprofits really lack that marketing. They don't know how to tell people what they do. They just so many of them do such a great job, but communicating that to their audience was not their strength. Whereas we were like MBA, marketing, communication. I worked in an ad agency called Ogilvy. I don't know if you know Ogilvy. Those days used to be Ogilvy and Martha. Yeah. So we actually started our advertising career there. So we said these guys need to communicate well. So we entered that space and we worked on that space. And slowly we were moving to the digital even before 14, 15 years. And then, but for the last 7 years, we've been like crazy seeing this digital thing go all over the world. So today we work with clients in the US, Australia, India, all over. Yeah, that's the short form of the story.
So I have a question, and this is common and what I hear often in the nonprofit world, and that is we don't have budget to hire someone to help us with marketing. I bet you hear that all the time, right? We don't have the budget. Will you tell us why it's so valuable that we hire someone like you, and why it's so important to budget for something like this?
Yeah, Crystal, I'm like, yeah, tell me about it the moment you said it. In fact, many of my friends, especially where Tim and me, we go to the social media marketing conferences, and I tell people I work with the nonprofits, and they all give me like this, oh, you poor little guy kind of a look, that's the space you work in. Nobody's got the money. But there are two aspects to it. Just to be on the serious side, I think nonprofits absolutely require what the marketing, advertising, promotions, and especially the new techniques that we're talking about, like remarketing, advertising and pixels and retargeting and all these AI and all the stuff is so essential for nonprofit marketing, and especially today, as we are talking this with all that's going on in COVID. I mean, there is so much need out there. People are in need. People are dying. People need help. And the amazing thing is, on the other side, there are organizations with grants and abilities and heart and really the ability to help people. People need help, and there is help, and they just don't know each other because there is no communication. So that's what we saw, my wife and me. We said, my goodness, I mean, these guys have the money, the capability, and the heart, and these guys really need it. And there's just no bridge in between. And that's where we jumped in. So just to come back to your point, this is absolutely essential for every nonprofit, everyone who has a heart to serve people, who have something to give to the society. I mean, even for corporates, I mean, we work with corporate social responsibility programs who don't know how to deal with the nonprofit side of their business. So we tell them how they can actually touch lives. So in our case, the return on investment, the ROI, is literally lives and smiles and hearts, and sometimes just water to drink, it, all those kind of things. I mean, it's sometimes it's so satisfying to work in this space. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to my sort of hard corporate days, sort of away from, because I do work with non-profit at the moment, actually. But what would you say is an example of one customer you've had that you have made a massive significance change and improvement, hopefully, to their, well, I would say to their business, but to their non-profit, so to speak?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are multiple organizations that we work with who have been able to reach global audience. But a prime example would be our own church that we go to here in India. We are a church where about 1,000 people can sit inside the auditorium. In a COVID situation, that goes down to like 500 because we had a 50% capacity. Yeah. So that's our church size. But if you see our live stream, which we started around 2007-8. I know many churches started live streaming just a couple of years ago because of COVID, but we started in 2008. That's when we did live streaming. So I headed the live streaming. We used to live stream using a dongle, like, that's all the speed we had. And we did just an audio stream. So we used to plug it in there and we used to watch the 1 to 10 people listening to it live. And we'll be like, whoa, And today, Tim, as a church, we're still just 1,000 to 500 people in seating capacity per service. Today, our live stream is consumed anywhere between 50 to 75,000 people around the world in 110 countries.
Yeah.
And it is only growing. We've got 75,000 subscribers on YouTube. We've got 250,000 plus subscribers on followers on Facebook. I mean, which is as you and me know, it's not that's just a number, but still, it's quite a big following for a church of that size. The same kind of impact we've had with nonprofits, with NGOs, and people working like that, and mostly because we started early. So we were like the evangelists, like going around telling people digital is important. And I started writing my book in 2013. And when I released it in 2017, I told people, guys, this is important. You got to read this. This is good. And then 3 years down, boom, COVID hits. Yeah. And I get calls from people saying, Natchi, you came to us 2 years ago, 1 year ago. And you guys, you will not, this story I have to tell you. There's one organization, one nonprofit that flew me down. And there was another guy who actually funded this whole thing. And we both went and sat with them in the headquarters. This was in 2018. So we sat with them and we gave them an entire social media strategy. And this was like thousands of kilometers away from where I live. So we literally took that effort to do that. And somebody did that, wanting to give the strategy to that organization. And boom, what happened? They did nothing with it for 2 years. And then COVID hit. Yeah. So just coming back to think, the kind of impact we've had on many organizations, but I also want to think about the kind of impact we could have had on many organizations. So I just can't help thinking about that when I talk about the impact that we've had in large organizations. So absolutely critical timing. Yeah.
Let's talk about your book. You wrote at least one book. What is the title, and tell us about it?
Yeah, this is a book called The Connected Church. So this is a social media strategy implementation book, which means it's got more of an action-oriented, step-by-step kind of guidance. There's very less theory, probably 2-3 chapters of theory and my story in there. But mostly it has a 6-part framework It's called a spirit framework. So it has 6 parts: SPIRIT, which is like a thing that builds on one by one. So structuring, packaging, that kind of thing. So it just goes one by one, and you build up to tracking, where you basically package your content, you structure your content, you integrate your content, you release your content, you ignite your content, and you track your content. So that's the book. It's been on Amazon, and interestingly, it's been on the bestseller list in the social media category, right next to people like John Lee Dumas and other people. So it's been interesting. I think number 20 or something for a few weeks.
Oh, that's great. Is this pertinent to nonprofits as well?
Yes, it's very pertinent to nonprofits, not just churches, because the approach is for both faith-based and for nonprofits. So that's the whole approach in terms of how to structure the content and so on.
So I think I've asked other people this question on this show before, but how important would you say, if you had a new church approach you, and they were like, Natchi, we don't really understand all this social media stuff. Where should we go? How important is it to be like present on the sort of boring networks like Facebook, Twitter, whatever? And how important is it to make sure that you're looking at the new frontiers of social media, like Twitter Spaces, TikTok, whatever VR platform that I've not heard of, or some new thing? How do you make that balance, and what do you recommend in terms of how churches use social media platforms in general?
Yeah. So most of the time when we sit with a new church that's coming to us, so I tell them 2 things. One is I say, okay, let's now pick the actual hands and legs that are going to work on this. Yeah. And most of the times, the church leaders who they come up and say, let me do it. And I try to kind of discourage them and tell them, hey, maybe you don't need to do this, because over the years, in my experience, I know many people say the leaders need to learn. In my experience, maybe the leaders should not be learning it. Maybe somebody else should be doing it, because they are good at leading. They are good at probably, teaching and, preaching and things like that. But there are other people in their team who are probably having these gifts of communication and so on. That could be volunteers, that could be just people attending, or that could be like paid staff or anywhere. So the very first thing I do is actually to pick the hands and legs that would execute. Because to me, Tim, that is the biggest challenge with nonprofits, because it's not, most people, even my knowledge, they know what to do. It's just that who is going to do that is like the biggest piece in nonprofits. So that is like the first thing I would usually tackle. And then I would go back to the channels and then say, okay, so I have this 4 communication model where the core message, the content, the channels, and the community. So that's like my connected church model that I try to implement. So I sit with them and I try to figure out the channel. So coming to your question, the first question that we generally ask is, this is probably relevant to even businesses and everybody, is to say, where are your audience? Because most of the time, the approach is to say, okay, should we be on Facebook or on Clubhouse? But that's not the question. The question is, are your audience on Facebook or Clubhouse? And you will be surprised. I mean, even for me, even clients outside the country, clients in the US and other markets, I'm finding many church-based clients are still on Facebook predominantly. It's interesting. I mean, they are there. I don't know what they do, but they're there. And because they're there, we have the opportunity to reach them. So we still do a lot of Facebook ads, Instagram ads, even though personally, I want to move into other things. As you know, I'm very active on Clubhouse and Spaces. And so those things are all what interests me. We do stuff in AR and AI and so on. But honestly, I don't know if it just depends on the organization. So for most organizations, people are still active on Facebook, and if not Facebook, Instagram, which is huge. So obviously the route to Instagram is again Facebook. So they need to have a Facebook presence in order to make use of the business manager and ad manager and all those kind of ecosystem that Facebook has built. So now Instagram is actually driving Facebook on the reverse, like a reverse integration kind of a thing. But anyway, so in terms of channels, so my advice is, after they figure out the hands and legs, I tell them, find out where your audience are, which channel they use. And then I also say, have 2 spaces as nonprofits, have one bandwidth to run the main channels where your audience are, and have another bandwidth and resources to do new channels where you want to get new audience, because most nonprofits are only focused on the existing audience, whereas if they want to grow, they need to kind of spread out. So that's where like Clubhouse and TikTok and Spaces and all those things start coming into the picture. So that's like my broad approach.
I'm pondering what you're saying, and I'm thinking about how when we talk to professional marketers and marketing agencies, we're trying to tell a story in our business or in our nonprofit. How do we capture a story with churches? How do you do that with churches?
Yeah, both with churches and nonprofits, where we start is the vision. Because with businesses, we always start, as great marketing gurus will say, you always start with the audience and go reverse into the business, because what the business wants to do is in some ways secondary to what the client wants and so on. But with nonprofits, the balance is slightly higher on the vision side, because what the core vision of nonprofits and churches is what attracts people. Like, why do somebody donate or connect or go to a church or give or support an organization? Because they identify themselves with that organization's vision. They say, they are like me. I like what they're doing. I would do what they would do. Or I am not able to do what they do, therefore I will support them. So those are like the 5-6 reasons that people support organizations. So basically, when I start with the vision, and I say, let's go deep, dive deep into the vision. And then after they dive deep into the vision, I start slowly bringing the audience aside and say, what do they want to hear? And that is typically the way we go about communicating their message to them.
So this is where I wasn't really paying attention enough to the last answer. No, a decent question.
I have more questions, Tim.
Let's change tack a little bit. We were talking about this a bit in the pre-chat, because as well as being a kick-ass social media expert and church person, you are living in the massive subcontinent known as India. How has COVID affected India? And what do you think there's been any, let's look at the positive. Has there been anything positive that's come out of COVID in terms of the development of India in general, would you say?
Yeah. As most of the listeners would know, India has been through one of the toughest seasons just in the last few months, especially starting March, April this year with our second wave. So it has been a tough year. It continues to be in many ways. But thankfully now the lockdowns are being eased and things are moving on. So we are all able to move forward a little bit in terms of our everyday life. So that's the reality from an India perspective. But as you say, I really like that angle where you're asking what good has come out of it. A couple of things. I think there is a realization that we do need to start building our healthcare infrastructure in some way, which is important, which we as a nation, it's been difficult for us to build simply because of the massive size of this nation. So I think there are conversations about that. We are starting to do that. There's a huge vaccination program that's happening, and even just awareness of just general health awareness is starting to increase. And I also think in my nonprofit world, as I work with people, like many of the campaigns that we run are campaigns related to fear and anxiety and worry. And just for example, like we ran a worry-based campaign, digital campaign during the COVID time. Interestingly, we hadn't planned like that. So one of my clients that I work with came up with this campaign in February 2020. Imagine that. Like we planned in October 2019, we started planning, and we just said, let's go after worry, for just like, out of the blue kind of a thing. What you can call it gut feel, you can call it inspiration in your heart, you can call it divine inspiration, whatever. So we just said, let's do a campaign on worry. And we kicked off that campaign on February 25th, 2020. And I was in the US at that time when we kicked off the campaign. And I flew back on March 5th. And you know what happened on March 20th? The whole world came locking down. So we had no clue that the campaign that we're going to release was going to make a huge impact in the mental health of like literally hundreds of thousands of people in India. And that campaign absolutely took off because that campaign was backed by people having conversations. This was for a nonprofit that was doing counseling. So we had counselors waiting to hear people out. Just imagine that, right? Lockdown, people lost their job. They don't know what's going to happen next. And there are counselors waiting to talk to them, to encourage them, to help them, and to, motivate them. And this whole campaign kicked off without knowing COVID was going to hit. So if you ask me what good that has come out of COVID for India, I think there is a real appreciation for mental health situation. There's a real appreciation because most of the time as a nation, we are moving very fast. And we're all like taking care of most of us are here like trying to fight our basic requirements, meet our requirements, and move forward. And it's not yet a developed nation. It's still developing. We are still on the way. So there are lots of things that we need to think of as we progress. Most of us. So for us, we never really think of mental health and mental well-being as something big. We just move on. I mean, like, get on with it. It's okay, go find your next, job or do what you have to do. But I think COVID really made us think about it, like our campaign about worry. So really, for me, it was so encouraging to see those conversations online and just how people were touched, just sitting at home and saying, thank you for listening to me. And then literally people said, thank you for listening to us. Yeah. They just wanted somebody to talk, to talk about their death or, whatever problem they were going through, losing their job. And so all our campaigns were, by the way, about like, are you worried about health? Talk to us. Are you worried about your family? Talk to us. Are you worried about COVID? Talk to us. And it was like so relevant. So absolutely, I think COVID has really opened new doors for us, the way we think about life itself. And for us in our own job, it has really changed the way we look at life. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Can you tell us the difference, or have you noticed a difference in social media strategy between the different networks that you work with? So for example, you work in India, you work in the United States, you work in maybe the United Kingdom or around the world. Is there a significant difference between the different countries in how you market or tell story?
Yes and no. Yes, primarily because each the way we communicate, obviously, for different cultures is slightly different, and the message is different. But in my world, in the nonprofit world, most of the messaging is in almost predominantly common, because we are dealing with human beings, and human beings are the same. I mean, we just come from different races, different culture, different upbringings, different locations. But if you look at it at the heart of it, we all have the same three components. We have a mind, we have a body, we have a life, spirit, or whatever you call that. We just have these three components. And because of our surroundings, we behave and we interact with our nature differently, but at the core, we are all the same. So for us in nonprofit world, we most of the time we're dealing with the mind and the spirit area, so which is very common. So we do change our communication material based on context and culture, but the core message for most part remains the same. So I work with organizations that are in the US that same message resonates very well with here. We in fact work with organizations in the Middle East, in the Western world, in Australia, and so on. So most of the time there is a resonation that I see that with all the people for certain types of messages, but definitely have to be conscious about the words we use, the kind of context. So we usually work with local consultants, and because I travel a lot, I can have a little bit of sense of what works and so on. But more than me doing it, I have friends wherever we go to hire and work on our campaigns. So that it's been fascinating. But in terms of channels, just to touch on that, I think the top channels still are very relevant. For example, TikTok doesn't work in India because it's banned. But other than that, if you look at the top channels, most of us follow the US model. So it's almost the same, like Facebook, YouTube first, always YouTube first now. So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, that order. So maybe in India we'll do more of WhatsApp, maybe in the US we'll do more of Messenger. So that's the subtle difference, but for the most part, most channels are the same across board.
Okay, I have one more question, Tim, and then you can take it away from me. I'm super curious because you said you work with your wife.
Yes.
So are you a team? Are you a team together in your business? How does this work?
Yes. So my wife's name is Tina, and as I said, we met in B school. We both are MBA marketing post graduation classmates. So eventually we started the business. We fell in love, and we waited for 9 years to get married. Long story. I had to go through a debt crisis which I had to get out, and we wanted to wait before we get married to get out of debt. So we waited for 9 years, and then now we've been married since 2008. So we both are directors of our company. So we both run the business together. So she handles more of a communication. She's from her father was an English professor and so on. So she's more of a communication, better expert than me. I do strategy a lot. So and so that's how we work together as a team. Always not easy to work with your spouse, but we've been doing it very well.
That's so cool. Can we talk to her sometime? Does she do interviews?
I was thinking,
yeah, sure. By the way, she online, like she would say, oh, I'm not an online person. I'm more of a, just a marketer, or, traditional and so on. But she has more followers on YouTube than I do. Her channel has like 22,000 subscribers. She does videos on, low carb, keto and stuff. That's another story that we have. I know we follow keto low carb method, and we have a channel for that. So she's also an expert on digital. Yeah.
Oh my word, Tim! Do you see my brain?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big aficionado. Well, I never actually ever stick to keto, but I'm that's more my dieting approach than anything else.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We're like totally, like even my daughter, we're like totally keto. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
But I was going to ask a question because there's something I've been appreciating personally over the last 2 or 3 years. But you were saying like India's still a developing country, because I think in the West, and I'd say especially in the US, but also to some extent in the UK, we all tend to think of the rest of the world as it was in like 1970. So could you kind of say, like, what point in the development cycle is India now? Because I'm sure there are some people who are thinking, like, oh, he's from India, he must be desperately poor and just going around chasing cows in the street or whatever. Could you kind of take the casual American viewer who might see this, who hasn't really ever thought of India and just thinks of everything as it was in the past, just because that's how it was when they brought up, what the state of India is now in terms of development?
Sure. Thank you for asking, because I've had people in US when I speak in stages at conferences. There was one person with all his heart and a good guy, great guy. So he just asked, Natchi, I have a question. In India, do still people wear like the one-piece dress that we see Gandhi used to wear? Yeah. And I said, yeah, absolutely. That's what I had till I got on my plane, So, okay. So thanks for asking that. Okay. Where is India? India, I mean, when I say it's not yet fully developed, what I mean is just a comparative statement, but we are doing so well with respect to technology. We are one of the, as many of you know, we are one of the top technology nations in the world. And in terms of, just to give a digital side, because I track trends, I release a news every week. So I kind of track trends a lot. So I get to hear all these interesting news, just some latest news, just so what's happening. Facebook has invested like billions of dollars into an Indian telecom company, and Google has invested billions of dollars into the same telecom company. And all these investments are happening into India simply because, first of all, there are 1 billion people. And second of all, these 1 billion people are all connected. So in terms of development, if you see, almost all of us have 2 smartphones. and our data is like the cheapest. Like right now I'm talking to you in my room, which is like we have a 500 Mbps, and I hardly I pay like $10 US a month or something like that. I mean, it's crazy. It's incredible the kind of technological connections that we have. And right from my every person that you meet on the street has at least 2 smartphones, and they are on WhatsApp. And in terms of, that's the digital side of technology. And obviously from the economic side also we are quite strong, because we are a saving nation. We're not a spending nation. Our culture is to save, so we've got lots of reserves and so on. But so there's been a lot of development, especially in the last 10 years. As a nation, we've seen tremendous growth, both in terms of GDP and other things. But of course, because of COVID and everything, right now it's low. We're still getting there in terms of infrastructure. It's not like you would find in the US or any other developed nation. That's not the infrastructure you'll find here. But you would be surprised if you go to certain cities, which are like really on par with any developed nation in the world. But there are also poor people. There's villages there. So the disparity, Tim, is very big. So the gap is very big. Similar to maybe other nations like South Africa, Nigeria, and all these places. The disparity is very high. Some Southeast Asian nations as well. So our disparity level is high, but our development is also pretty fast. But the good thing about a country like India is also its bilateral relationship with many countries, because of which our trade is very strong. And so there's a good balance of forex and so on. I'm not an economist, but just a little bit of knowledge. So we're pretty balanced that way. Yeah.
One of the things that Tim and I had a vision for when we started the show was just to speak to people from around the world, so that people from around the world could hear different voices. Okay, so I have my final question, this time for real. Tim, this time for real.
You don't want it to go an hour like the last.
I have so many questions for you, but I promise this time it's the last. So we get to speak to people from around the world, and something you said earlier captured my attention. And I would like to hear from you something very simple. What do you think makes humanity more alike than different?
I think 2 things. One is our heart to give. We're all basically, in some way, we are givers. And second is the way we connect emotionally. I think deep within our heart, I think all human beings, this is what I believe, because I like, for example, when Tim and I, we met for the first time, there was just something. I mean, you just meet somebody and you hang around and then you meet them in the next year, and then you realize that there is this relationship, this friendship, there's something, a connection between us. So that ability to connect, I think, is worldwide. Like anywhere you go, any culture, anywhere, like when I travel to, say, Africa, or when I travel to Australia, or when I travel to the US, I always see, when I sit across the table with people and I genuinely open my heart and I say, I want to connect with somebody, I am able to do that. So I think all humanity have this amazing ability to make that connection. It's almost like a Ethernet cable that's invisible. We all like click, so that is common. And the second is the ability to give. I think all of us have this natural, innate ability to give. Some of us give in the form of like a business, like selling something. That's also giving. Some of us give just by being quiet and just being there for someone. Some of us give money. Some of us give time. But I think all of us all over the world have this ability that I believe God has put inside of us to give. And that makes it very special. And that's a common. Those are 2 things I could think of, but I'm sure there are more.
Okay, so let's say that somebody is watching it now who's thinking, oh, I need to hire this guy to run my social for church or non-profit, or they just really want to follow you on social media for some other reason. How can people find out about you, and how can people hire you?
I think the best way is Instagram. I am Natchi Lazarus on Instagram. And all my links are in my Instagram bio. It's amazing how Instagram gives you just one link, and that's what you want to talk about everywhere. So so that bio link has a page that has my WhatsApp, it has my email, it has my messenger. So you can basically get to everything that I do if you get to my Instagram bio, and it's public. So I think that's the best way to do it. I also have a website called NatchiLazarus.com. So any of you listening, if you're interested in getting a social media news every week, I mean, I do it for churches and nonprofits, but 40% of my audience are business guys. So you need not be, because everybody's like, oh, we need to know the top 5 social media news. So we literally pick like 30, 40 news items, and we shrink to 5 news items, and we give it in 5 minutes every week on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and everywhere for free. I mean, we just give it to people. So if you're interested in that, also all that is on my Instagram link. Thanks, Tim, for asking.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you for being here. It was so nice to chat with you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, everybody. You can hang around after the titles if you want to chat to us in real life, actually. But thanks for everybody who watched, and see you guys next week.
Bye.
This is terrifying for me.
I've made more money in the last 3 years than I did in the previous 7.